All right,
Okay.
Tanya Woo, why you running?
Yes, I grew up here. I grew up in Beacon Hill. I have a small business in the Chinatown-International District and now live in Rainier Valley. And I've seen what happens to neighborhoods that don't have a voice. And I want to change that. I don't think we should be expected to live with bad city policy. And so I've had experience. I fought against city county discrimination to one of our most endangered neighborhoods in the nation. I pushed back when the community needed a voice. And I've done things like help build more affordable housing. I have 84 units of workforce housing in the Chinatown-International District that only charges a percentage of our tenants' income so that no one's forced to pay a rent they cannot afford. I've also been working in the public safety sphere. I have a group called the Chinatown-International District Community Watch. We consider ourselves the alternatives to policing, but we also work with first responders, and we go out to make sure that our businesses, our small businesses, our residents, everyone's doing okay. We de-escalate fights. We also go into the encampments in 12th and Jackson and try to connect people to resources, and we also engage in mutual aid. And so I've been working these last couple of years, have feet on the ground, and I'm tired of seeing a very divisive city council talking about ideology. We need actionable items, we need solutions, we need to act. And so we need leaders, elected leaders, who will come out and listen to the community. And we also need, things being passed through the city council that will benefit community members. And so I promise to work hard, to show up and listen.
Why'd you pick this spot, Jefferson Park?
Oh, I grew up in this area, so I would come here often after school. I did Girl Scouts here. Jefferson Community Center was where I learned how to dance. I still dance, and I took pottery classes, was here for the free lunch program, and so I spent most of my youth here. This is home.
What's the top priority, you think, for this district?
Public safety. This is what I'm hearing at the doors. Seems like every single conversation I have is regarding concerns regarding the 14 home invasion robberies, regarding the the public use of drugs that it's at 12th and Jackson, seeing our small businesses suffer from constant broken windows, and it's what everyone's talking about, and people are concerned.
So how do you fix it? How do you change the trajectory?
I believe there's a short-term and a long-term approach to fixing this. But basically, in the short term, we need to work with our communities, listen to the concerns, and try to build that trust between police department. I believe there needs to be reform. There needs to be more culturally competent training, but we do need officers. We also need the alternatives to policing, such as what my group is doing. We are able to de-escalate fights. We never had to call the police. We always were able to use alternative measures to solve most of the issues that we're seeing. But in terms of we were in an encampment and there was a shooting there, that was something that we could not handle on our own, and we absolutely need police. So I believe building that trust between police department and communities, allowing communities to have a voice, have a plan, and allowing for these alternatives to take place. More block watch group like my group, or actually having that program in the city where we have social workers and case managers, alternatives to policing out there and doing that work. In the long term, I believe that we need more programs for our youth. Our youth have been asking for late night basketball. They have been asking for after school programs. We need to do what they're asking. A lot of times when we go into community centers, there's fees involved. How do we get around that and just allow kids to be kids and come and play and follow their passions? And then we also need to create an economic engine. We need to create more jobs, support our small businesses, create more jobs, and allow for more job training within our community centers as well. And I think that long-term and short-term approach, looking at that systemic change versus, I believe community investments are necessary and they're great, but how do you make that systemic change so that we are sustainable in our solutions?
You just tied it all together there, homelessness, drugs, policing, you said more cops, but how do you hire cops when the incentives aren't necessarily bringing in a ton of new officers right away, and there's a question of whether the city can actually even afford them in a couple of years?
Yeah, so what we saw in the last couple of years was that the police department was not actually defunded. They were demoralized. We saw 600 officers quit. And that brings us to where we are now without having alternatives in place. And so I think having managers who appreciate you, who are willing to work with you, goes a long way. No one wants to work for a boss who does not like them. So having a city council that is supportive yet firm and holding, their employees accountable and being able to work with everybody is very important. And I think that feel going forward with the city council races that are coming up, changing the feel and changing that, the morality of the department will go a long ways. And I love before the badge program, where they're taking cadets before they go into the police academy, they're taking them to different communities and learning about the communities. They go to the CD, the Chinatown-International District, and meeting people and building that trust and building those relationships. They meet people who are firmly incarcerated, they meet former gang members, and I think we're getting more officers who are able to serve the communities they grew up in and to learn more about different communities. And I met a couple of people. There was this young lady who was a baker her entire life, now will be a police officer, and I think that's amazing. We definitely need more officers that look like us or look like the community they serve in and speak the language. And I see that these programs are starting. It takes 1 to 2 years to train an officer, so we're not going to see the results for a couple of years, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
On homelessness, you have felt and you've been vocal about the feeling that the Chinatown-International District has been unfairly burdened with the amount of homelessness encampments near the freeway, both and outside the Wing Luke Museum. How do you fix homelessness? What's your big idea?
Yes. And so a lot of the work that my group has been doing is we go out into the encampments and we try to build that trust and build those relationships with people. And by going to the encampments, we really see who are the people who are in need of resources and help, and then who are there to prey on our unhoused, unfortunately. And so getting to know the community and building that trust and finding out what the individual, barriers are. There are a lot of people who've been through the system. The system is definitely broken. Maybe they went to a shelter where they didn't feel like they were fairly treated. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable in the shelter because most of them are based off of religious organizations. Maybe they have a partner, they had a service animal they couldn't bring with them, or their stuff was stolen. There are a lot of barriers, so they just didn't feel safe. And so how do we get to know that person and partner with them to lead them through that journey to find housing? There's not enough housing, but we definitely could get started with the steps involved to build that trust and to build those relationships going forward. And then we definitely need to build more housing. I believe housing first is the way to go. Get people off the streets, because fentanyl is a deadly poison. It's not a drug. It's killing people. I've done CPR. I've been on my hands and knees surrounded by needles doing CPR Narcan on not just our unhoused, but people from all walks of life. But how do we get people out of that situation? Because I know it's in a way community, but it's not safe. People are dying. And I know the argument is, sweeps kill, but on the other hand, we're seeing fentanyl deaths daily and our systems are overwhelmed. So we need to get people inside, we need to find housing, and we need to build that trust.
You were against, though, the mega shelter in the CID.
I was not against the mega shelter. We were trying to get community engagement and trying to have a seat at the table. So basically the CID has experienced a long line of projects that have been forced upon the community. We had I-5, we had the stadiums, the Seattle streetcar, all these projects that boxed us in. And we wanted to say what was happening with our community. So we were not against the shelter. We just needed a seat at the table. We wanted a good neighbor agreement that should have been in place when that shelter opened back in 2020. And we also wanted dialogue and a conversation, basically. We invited all our elected officials to please come and talk to us, have a town hall. We'd organize it. They just have to show up, and no one took us up on that offer. And so basically we're just fighting for respect, we're fighting for a voice. And there were other concerns that sprung up too, the fact that we had 7 homicides in the CID last year, the highest in all of Seattle, but they were happening within the encampments. And so we wanted safety not just for the community, but for our unhoused neighbors as well. And so we wanted a public safety plan, but basically it was all about having a seat at the table. And that's why I'm running from that, because I realized we kept asking for it and not really getting far. And I am now running for it, so we can definitely have representation.
So if you have a seat at the table, you get elected, would you be open to a significantly larger tiny home village? So not even a a tiny home village, but a larger tiny home village in the CID.
Long as there was dialogue, conversation with CID members, I would be for it. I love tiny home villages. Everyone's asking for it. And you know, we need to build more of those tiny home villages as well as RV safe lots.
So, full disclosure, you and I worked together at the same time at one of the TV stations in town. I think that I would tell people what I've told people when I'm out and about, that you are genuinely a nice person. In this campaign, that is translated to you have not thrown elbows at your opponent. You have not insulted your opponent. You have not talked necessarily about what she has or she hasn't done. Is that on purpose?
Oh, I think this is about the issues. I'm sure my opponent is an amazing and nice person as well. It's just that, you know, we have different approaches, and looking at our records, very different opinions on what we should do with the city going forward.
What do you think she's not doing, though, as a city council member?
Oh, from many people I've heard is that there has not been any meaningful engagement. And it's not just showing up, it's actually listening and having that dialogue and having those conversations. I was at a Vietnamese community public safety meeting, and many members from the Vietnamese community are saying, you know, we want more officers, we need public safety, we want to build that trust, and our council member didn't say anything. And so I think people want to hear from her and they want to be heard. But, you know, this meaningful engagement needs to happen, and that's part of the reason why I'm running. Like I said, with this Chinatown-International District, we were a community in crisis, and none of our elected officials showed up for us, and that includes our current council member.
And on public safety, you've been at a lot of the events lately involving what has happened in South Seattle. Your opponent has not. How do you make people feel comfortable in your district if you're elected? Because it does seem like, and it's not just it's not just conjecture, that this is a part of town that has been unfairly targeted, has seen unfair levels of crime that other parts of the city have not.
Yes, with our homicide rates, we're well past, or going past, the rate of homicides we had last year, and most of them have been happening here in South Seattle, unfortunately. And, you know, community wants answers. We know that the only way that we can handle violent crimes is with the police department, because a lot of us who are working in the public safety sphere are not equipped to handle that. But we do want to build trust, and we do want more accountability and culturally competent training and services. We also want to be heard. And so I think there is that openness to having that dialogue with the Seattle Police Department. We do want to see more officers, and just being able to come up with a compromise, also having that alternatives to policing in place would be really important going forward. But I think, yes, there is, you know, the police department definitely needs reform, needs more accountability, but at the same time, we do need that department. We cannot defund police.
I want to try to get you to correct the record on the next question. The stranger went after you a few months ago in the primary and said that you had not voted in prior elections up until recently, and you voted for Tammy Morales the couple of times you did vote. Is that accurate? Did you not vote?
I didn't start voting until recently. I think I registered in 2015, and my voting record has been very spotty. I admit that I am in the wrong, and I have realized the importance of voting. I didn't feel like I had a voice, and I didn't feel like, you know, my vote matters. But now, right before the pandemic, I realized how important voting is, and having that voice and making sure that communities are engaged, and making sure that we do have say in the direction of how our city goes. And so I spent most of my time over about a year ago, about last September, just trying to register as many voters from the Asian American community as I can, non-English speakers, and really proud to see that many people in their 80s who have never voted before are voting for the first time. And so I think going forward, we're making that a big point in the campaign, to be able to, you know, register voters and be able to have them vote and get engaged in the political process. I think, especially for the Asian American community, many of us did not feel like, you know, when that solar shelter was being expanded, no one knew what to do. Everyone was trying to figure out how to get involved, and trying to I guess, lead community members in how to get involved in political processes. What you can do, you can go to the city council meeting, you could do public comment, and your voice is very valuable. And so going forward, in terms of whether I voted for Tammy or not, I don't remember which elections I voted for, which ones I did not vote for. I really need to have that paper in front of me, but it turns out I did not vote for her, and I made that mistake. Well, I did not vote in that election, so I made that mistake that I had voted for her. But I made an assumption I should have printed out my record and took a look at it before answering those questions.
So we talked about policing, we've talked about response times. You know, you and I both know this. I have been around this town for a while. It seems like the south side of Seattle has not had the same level of financial investment as other parts of this city. There are people in your district who feel neglected, whether it be by the lack of police response or just by the lack of financial investment by the city. Finally, Rainier Beach is getting a new building. But if you're elected, how do you change that? How do you get more money flowing towards your district that we have not seen in decades?
Yes, I believe that disinvestment is the effects of segregation and redlining, the legacy of it. We're still feeling that today. And it's not just only evident in investments here in South Seattle, but our tree canopies, our green spaces. It's reflective in a lot of things that we don't realize, how different our district seems compared to other districts when we leave this area. And so yes, we definitely need more investments. We have the least amount of sidewalks in this district. We have a lot of, across the board, a lot of disinvestment, and something people are asking for. And so I think it's not just investments, but it's also systemic change in policy and looking at that policy, especially for this area, and there's not a one size fits all. We have to look at it from neighborhood by neighborhood because we're all so very different. This is a very diverse neighborhood and it operates very differently than others. And so looking at a neighborhood by neighborhood case basis and looking at what the needs are, every neighborhood has a plan, what the plans call for, making sure that we're funding that and not just, having, I know a lot of our nonprofits want investments and need funding, but how do we make that systemic change so that it's sustainable, and a lot of nonprofits are not just fighting for funding all the time. And so how do we especially looking at policy changes for sustainable solutions to the issues that we're seeing? We just can't toss money at an issue. We have to look at sustainable change.
So I go back to this idea that you are fundamentally a nice person. I think anybody who has met you over the years, they don't say a bad thing about you. You're a nice person. You show up in your neighborhood, but city council isn't necessarily, those chambers are not always nice. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who come in and make verbal attacks, and this has not been an easy job for a lot of council members, especially over the last decade. You deal with a lot of negative stuff. So are you truly prepared to handle that and handle the elbows that get thrown around City Hall?
Yes, I believe I'm prepared. I mean, all my experiences have led up to this moment, rebuilding a historic hotel, being told no all the time because we couldn't qualify for a loan as a family of color, and it took us many years to rebuild. And then especially with the Community Watch, we are out there on the streets every single day. We face really harrowing situations. We've been involved with fights. Someone had a gun once, and so trying to de-escalate, especially and find common ground in a street fight situation, I think, is transferable to City Council. And I've been fighting against city discrimination my whole life with my work in the CID. And so I think I am ready, I'm prepared, I'm willing to take off the gloves and really calling out what the problems are and trying to find solutions and finding common ground. And I believe we all want the same thing. We want to make the city better. We want to respond to hate with love, and we all want to be able to work together. And that's something we all agree on and something we could move forward from there.
It's been a windy day, but it's a sunny day, sunny fall day here at Jefferson Park. Thank you, Tanya, for sitting down with me.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad the weather held. It was fun. Thanks.